Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Trade Stock. I'm your host, Justin White, and today we have Tim Hendricks in the studio. Tim has been in the landscape industry for over 40 years. He's going to be sharing a wealth of information with us. Tim has worked in all different areas of the landscape industry, from commercial maintenance to tree management to residential maintenance, and now today in high-end estate landscape construction. We're going to cover the gambit here. We're going to go into the nitty-gritty of the landscape industry, from working with your hands and making sure your team has what they need to be successful, all the way up to what the CEOs of the largest companies are doing to be successful. Tim has had a front row seat to many landscape companies that he is going to share with us. So without further ado, let's jump into today's episode.
Old childhood friend encouraged me. He says, with what you've been doing at Valley Crest the last 7 years, you most certainly qualify, and this is a really cool company. This was the old Cagwin Dorward. And that marked the next 8 or 9 years between Cagwin and my 2-year stint at BrightView. That marked a journey that I've been watching you take between managing the P&L, managing growth, managing business developers, being involved in that networking world that gets you commercial landscape maintenance work. Your post this morning about, we sell hours. It represents 40 or 45% of our gross revenue. We're an hours company. We're a labor company. And the rest of it is icing. Because of the industry we're in, we have to produce a product, and you have to manage the other costs. I guess the other big one is your overhead, including equipment and vehicles. We don't really spend much, at least in the commercial maintenance side. We don't really spend much on materials. And I've been both the 7 years at Valley Crest Construction, and then again since I left BrightView and my short stint at Site 1 Landscape Supply. Materials have represented close to half of my spend when you're on the construction side. So it's a different animal. It is an entirely different animal to manage, and you have to be very careful. Purchasing all of a sudden becomes, critical, unless you're on a T&M thing. You mentioned this last 2 years I've been on real high-end custom estate residential, and there basically haven't been any budgets. It's all cost plus, and it's a wonderful world to live in. It's kind of fantasy land as a businessman, but it's a wonderful place to operate for a practitioner. It's very enjoyable. It was a dream job, or I probably wouldn't have left my last gig in Seattle. It was quite a client who shall remain nameless. There's a pretty firm NDA involved, but it was mid-Peninsula, so you can only imagine.
Yeah, and that's where the that's where the world doesn't become what the cost or the budget is. Can you get these giant trees in and this crazy vision we want? Can you make it happen?
Yeah, and it's like, well, we can't get it with one crane. Well, then we'll just have to use 2 cranes at once. Just ridiculous scopes. And usually in that world, you're more of an outdoor general contractor. It's not just L&I. You're doing everything, all site development. It has to encompass everything. You're acting as the general contractor for everything but the building envelope that people live in. And even then, the lines.
So you're not. And so you're not just managing L&I. You're also managing other subcontractors. So tell us a little bit about that. What's it like going from the two worlds, from maintenance and commercial maintenance to now this really high-end custom residential build?
It's kind of where I started. I didn't know it then, and it was at a lesser degree in Central Contra Costa, but the gentleman that I got my chops with, who I pay homage to daily, he was like a dad. I'm still in contact with his wife. He passed 4 or 5 years ago. His name was Roger Fisk, and he was like a grandfather of our industry. He was the chapter president of CLCA Bay Area when there was only one chapter in Northern California. in the mid 60s. So he was already a Cal graduate, landscape architecture, already had started a business, and already sold or got out of the business. He got disillusioned with commercial maintenance, bought a bike shop. A couple of years later, came back as a custom residential contractor, and that's when I lucked into. I was a 20-year-old punk with long hair, looking for an outdoor job, and where I could take a couple of classes at a junior college, and you know, I had been bitten by the landscape bug earlier, but it was also, I'll truly firmly admit, it was almost like a default career, which I'm sure you've heard that term bantied about when you're looking for management, or if you've had discussions about future labor pool. Are we a destination industry, or are we a default career path that people enter it as a gardener because they weren't able to do something else? It's hard to tell, and we'd like to change that. We'd like to propagate future management people. But so I entered that world, and I lasted 4 or 5 years. I started a business thinking I could do it myself. I dabbled a little. I was doing residential maintenance at the time and loved it, and then dabbled a little in residential construction as grunt labor. Then I left the industry for 5 or 6 years. And when I came back, we crossed paths again. That was 1993. And he was truly a mentor at that point. He let me enter in as a foreman. And you got to learn that as you're doing residential construction, you have to manage and be a master of every trade: concrete, masonry, electrical, plumbing, everything, absolutely everything. And I honestly, the joy that the landscape industry has brought me all these years is more mechanical than beautification. I like the construction side of the industry. I like function over form instead of the opposite. I love the fact that we build landscapes out of raw land that have walls and paths and plumbing and electrical and drainage and, soil engineering, all this stuff. And then we ice it with some plants and some irrigation. But that's what's kept me involved all these years. I love the engineering aspect of our trade. And I know you guys do quite a bit of construction, and there's something about it. The creativity of it really gets you going.
It does. I completely agree with that take. It's the planting is what everyone sees at the end of the day, but what goes into it from a engineering perspective is, I think, what I'm most fascinated by. And then the ability to create these engineered outdoor living spaces that then actually have a biological aspect that plants and trees can thrive in. Because I think it's easy to go, engineer and build a pad that a house can be built on. It's harder to engineer a slope with multiple retaining walls that then allow plants and trees and vines and ground cover to thrive in. And that is harder than it sounds.
Yep.
So, Tim, I got a question for you.
Sure.
In regards to Roger Fisk, and the question is, what did you learn from him that took you multiple years to understand what he was actually trying to teach you? Because I think our mentors teach us things that we don't understand at the time, and then 5, 10, maybe 20 years later, we look back and we realize, oh, that was the lesson he was teaching me. Were there any lessons you look back on that really stick with you from Roger?
God, that's a really good question. And yes, I'm sure I learned my sense of integrity from him long before I possessed any measure of really solid integrity, that you have to live with yourself and do the right thing even if nobody's looking. And he firmly believed in that. And it's like, yeah, but if we do it this way, we'll make more money. And he really impressed upon you, don't worry about that. There's plenty of margin. And I didn't understand, the finer points of how razor thin or not margins were, and how building redundancies into your margins, just in case. It's not like you're trying to make 30% net profit off of customers or off of your business. you just get taxed for it anyway. But the point is that don't sell yourself short. Don't do it for free, because you want to be able to do it right. And he'd pass on jobs where he'd be forced into a corner to maybe be tempted to do it wrong. So he never painted himself. And I didn't understand that when I was certainly not when I first worked for him in my 20s. And when I returned to him in my early 30s, it took me years to understand that. And probably just as I was leaving, it started to dawn on me what he was trying to instill in me as a businessman with integrity. You're right. That doesn't come until later.
It's a really great lesson. And I am kind of tying these things together in my head as I read your self bio you provided beginning of the podcast. Is you seem to have found like this really, really large amount of joy in the residential estate world.
Oh, yeah.
And it seems like that kind of ties back to not being low bid. It's cost plus. And so does that kind of build on that foundation that Roger helped you create in your world today in high-end residential design build?
It does. And when I have casual or even official conversations, I do some consulting now with smaller contractors and with national groups that are reaching out for industry demographic opinion. I don't know if you've been contacted by some of them, but there's always a research group looking to get a broad insight. Most of it's for PE. They're all doing it for mergers and acquisitions. They want to get a take of the industry, and they're selling their services too as data collectors. But when I talk with people, not only not sell yourself short, which I mentioned, charge what you're worth. The other thing is know how to qualify both commercial maintenance and custom residential bids. There's the right contractor for every customer, and you may not be the right commercial landscape maintenance contractor for certain properties. And you gracefully shake hands and say, maybe I can refer you to a couple other contractors. This doesn't really fit our business model. And high-end residential installers are really good at doing the same things. The ones that I know that have been successful all over the state, and in fact in the Seattle market, know how to qualify leads long before anybody's wasted any of their time. It's so important, and I bet you're learning that on a daily basis right now, is pre-qualifying leads and working with your business developers and not discouraging them, but also at the same time having them focus on things that's going to work for both of you, for their salary and commission structure and for your profitability.
I've got a big smile on my face because it's so true. You hit on the point. It's the business developers are out chasing revenue because that's what we've told them to do.
Yep.
So how do you go about defining your ideal client or defining what that client should look like and then communicating that to your business developers?
So with commercial maintenance, you can get unit square foot pricings and get in the ballpark. You can look at a property, and these days with technology, you can get a square footage of landscaped area. And if they can get what the current market is for that property, you can say we're not in the ballpark. The other one, which I know you've probably used, is don't go after dog properties. Sure, we can turn them around and make them look prettier, but the ones that are being well taken care of that are out on the market are probably lacking in communication and service and not in landscape maintenance, which means they're probably priced right with ours. And I would try to steer my business developers towards better looking properties, because without increasing their costs, if you walk a property, before you've even talked to the customer, if you walk a property and see a bunch of unrepaired irrigation and holes where plants should be, there's a good chance that customer's probably not spending money, and they probably won't with you either. So that was the low-hanging fruit usually.
I really like this. This is actually, I feel, a contrarian take in our industry today. I think business developers They come in, and we've hired a number of quote unquote experienced business developers, and they come in and they are searching for those properties that don't look good.
Yep.
But I'll totally agree here is we've stopped trying to tell our potential clients and say, we will make your property look better than it does. We will improve the quality of service, because they don't actually care that much about it when it doesn't look good, mostly. And then when it looks really good, they just want it to keep looking good. It's always water management. It's communication by the account manager. It's having a good budget for the next season. Those are the things that seem to be falling short. And so when we talk about commercial maintenance, and then I want to get back to residential, but when we talk about commercial maintenance, you've seen so many amazing operations. Tim, what are the top 3 things that the best commercial maintenance professionals do to just provide that high level of client experience?
So hands down, no shade on BrightView. They have their strong suits. I'm sure that we could all pick them apart and find a few things they don't do well. Cagwin Dorward is now a different company. I don't know exactly how they operate, but I know Richard Sperber, and I bet they operate pretty similarly. I don't think he's taken them apart. My 7 years with Cagwin, if I could go back and do it over again, I've really enjoyed all my experiences since Cagwin, but they are hands down the best company I've ever worked for. The things that they focused on, maybe not groundbreaking, but certainly early adopters, is complete transparency with financials, as much as you could be, all the way down to field level. Here's a dollar bill. Here's 100 pennies on the table. Where do you guys think these 100 pennies go every time I get a dollar bill from the customer? And really teaching P&L basics all the way down to the field level. So the whole team, the whole school of fish is swimming in the same direction. Here's why we do what we do. Here's why we can't pay you an unlimited amount of money. And here's why we have nice trucks. And here's why we're so focused on my number 2 most important thing, which is training. We are not getting, landscape companies in the 70s and 80s were getting mid-management level workers, candidates at least, right out of college, out of ornamental horticulture programs in all of the best junior colleges and some of the best 4-year colleges in the state. That died off sometime in the 90s. They were entering different fields, and we had a hole in our pipeline. Smart companies started training their own mid-level management, and Cagwin invested a lot of money in training and leadership training, and all of their existing leaders, branch managers, even down to account managers. We'd continue to enrich all of their skills, basic leadership skills that don't just apply to landscaping, business management skills. Those 2 things, Cagwin was really, really, I don't know about ahead of their time, but certainly not lagging in any of their business acumen. And then the third thing was moderate growth. They taught us all at every level, it's not all about growing 15 or 20% in a year. It's the right kind of growth. If we grow too big, if we go land that $50,000 a month HOA, we're going to have to really spend above what we had allocated for in equipment and trucks, and it's going to be a big capital outlay, and it's a big risk for the company and for our cash position. We should look at mid-sized companies this year and then set ourselves a goal of acquiring 1 whale. So they really taught smart growth that 8% a year consistent was better than 15% one year and 0% the next. And those are the 3 things I took away from there. And it applies to every genre in our industry. Construction, maintenance, high end, low end. All 3 of those apply to everything.
Wow. I really like those 3. And I would agree that they are universal and probably can be applied to any trade business out there, maybe any business out there, but especially people with technicians and craft labor. And as much as people like to kind of water down the maintenance side of the industry as terms of it's just
craft.
mowing, blowing.
Yeah.
It's a craft. Thank you. So,
Yeah.
what are we missing today in 2026? You said it fell off in the 90s, that really quality people coming into the industry. I mean, in 2026, what should companies be doing to make sure that our teams are keeping up with the demand of the craft and really becoming true technicians?
I don't know. I don't know if it boils down to advertising or getting them sooner. How many
Mhm.
conversations at the dinner table, mom, dad, a 12-year-old girl, and a 10-year-old boy? Does the boy look at mom and dad at dinner and say, Mom, Dad, when I grow up, I want to be a gardener? Is that happening, and does it need to? I don't know. When do people get the bug? Are enough of them getting the bug? Do we plant it? I think high school's probably too late. Going to job fairs at junior colleges and four-year universities, um, maybe we can attract some of them, but how do we get colleges to reinvigorate their ornamental horticulture programs? Or do we get people to spur off of, you notice that in landscape construction, all of the bigger companies, they're requiring degrees, some of them in landscape architecture, but when they hire for project management, they're requiring degrees in construction management, which can be in any field, and then they're teaching our trade. Maybe that's the answer. I don't know. I
True.
still think we're lacking in trade knowledge. Where do we get people
Yeah.
to come to us other than developing them ourselves that know our craft? Like you say, they're mechanics in our trade. They came ground up from gardening. They came ground up from landscape construction. Maybe we want those other skills, the hard skills, the business management skills, how to be a project manager. We probably need them both, but if they're not offering our trade in four-year universities as much as they once were, Cal Poly's down to a skeleton department if they even offer an OH degree at all anymore. I don't know if you've been to a college recruiting function there.
I will
Yeah,
say the Cal Poly faculty and staff are actually, on the upward trend there, and their
that's
numbers
good.
are not what they used to be, but they're moving in the right direction. What's interesting is I think Tiffany, who runs the program, would agree that their arboretum is a huge part of that. It's an amazing arboretum there at Cal Poly, and a lot of the students work in the arboretum. And then Tim, they catch that bug. They see their hard work becoming, blooming flowers in the springtime, and they fall in love with landscaping, probably like you and I did, and
Yep.
and they fall into the industry.
The owner of Oxbow Landscaping up in Napa, who I had the pleasure to work with for a year, and he's an old friend. He was one of the guys that got lucky enough to live in that house that's up there right by the nursery, um,
Yeah,
on campus. I don't know if the house still exists up there by the greenhouses, but it
they
was
have
a
4 beds
coveted,
in it.
yeah, it was a coveted position. And look where he is today. He's the owner of a thriving company in the Napa Valley. And yep, Cal Poly was different in the 70s, and hopefully it's reinventing itself now. I think you're right. Maybe private equity is helping us. Maybe the business
Yes.
community is realizing that this is a money-making industry, and maybe they're helping us attract talent. I don't know.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt, they're helping us bring in some really high level talent, and they understand business fundamentals, and they know to have a private equity playbook achieve success, they are going to need to add people, and they're going to need to add well-trained people to the middle of the organization, the crew leaders and the supervisors and the production managers. And I've really seen a really nice investment from private equity into developing those individuals. So I got to give them their flowers. They've brought some really high level people into our industry. I look at LinkedIn a lot, and I see private equity, who they hire, and I see where they came from. And it's almost
Yep.
never from inside the landscape industry.
Yeah, the two newer players. BrightView is a different animal, and their private equity investment firm. I think it's still KKR. But
Yep.
when Richard Sperber re-entered, and just before him, Brian Helgo with Monarch, they came from a background of what we're talking about, and they infused these new companies that they were running with the help of private equity and mergers and acquisitions. They infused it with some of that old, some of those old skills in hiring and recruiting and building systems that were sustainable. They've both, as you've watched, been very successful in their business models, both Monarch and Sperber. Boy, if you look around the nation, they're two of the leaders of who's been doing it pretty right in the last 10 years.
I agree. It's easy to point at the top of the pile at BrightView or Sperber or now Mariani and others and kind of pick them apart.
Me too.
You know, but at the end of the day, like there's just so much to look at. It's really, really hard to grow a multi-state, multi-region landscape company and have your quality as consistent as maybe, let's say, a Starbucks would in a franchise model. Yep. Tim, you've worked in some of these bigger companies. What's the biggest challenge when you start to approach that 100 million plus mark that I think a lot of companies are approaching or now, you know, there's at least 20 companies on the top 100 list that are over 100 million? What are the biggest challenges they face?
The hardest part is disseminating. We don't want to all attend meetings nonstop and have meetings just to have meetings about meetings. You know, there has to be a goal. And it's really hard to disseminate in large groups. Regional management that's on the same page as senior level ownership is really critical in getting out the message to the next level below them and listening to that next level and bringing it back. At Cagwin, at a much smaller scale, Cagwin topped out at around 40 million a year by the time I had left. And I think that's about what they sold at. And they were 9 or 10 Bay Area counties with some subcontracted work, maybe in another 6 or 8 counties. They used to call it the cascade of information, and it was monthly. They'd have a senior leadership team meeting on a certain week of the month that coincided with financials. Then they'd have a branch managers meeting, and at the time they had 6 branch managers. 2 or 3 representatives from senior leadership would lead the meeting. The branch managers would attend. They'd bring their concerns from the bottom up, and they would read the newspaper and bring the news from the top down, and you'd discuss leading indicators as well, because a lot of those meetings are just discussing lagging indicators, which doesn't do you much good. It's water that's already left the dam. Then we'd hold branch meetings the following week and disseminate all that information to our teams. They'd disseminate field information from us upward. It was a well-functioning system, and it would be circular monthly. You start getting above 40, 50, 80, 100 million, and you're in, 3 time zones. That can get pretty tough. And I'm sure that's where the leak in the boat is. When there is a leak.
Right. And I can definitely see the challenge of that. Just working and running a $25 million company, we're starting to run into the challenges of the system we've built at 20 million. It's working, but I could see us as we expand regionally, it no longer working at, it's not even necessarily a point in dollars. It's more, I think, a point in geographic expanse.
And culture. Your culture has a risk of maybe not falling apart, but getting a few dents in it, which you don't want.
So you mentioned leading and lagging. I completely agree. And I want to come back because you mentioned leading and lagging indicators. And I just wanted to ask if you had a few examples of what are a couple leading indicators and maybe a couple lagging indicators that you would like to be tracking if you're a senior level person in a landscape company today?
So leading indicators, and we started off our conversation about it, whatever it was, about half an hour ago, is hours. If you're in a commercial landscape maintenance company, leading indicators are hours. And if you're using electronic time capture, with now 90% of the companies are, you can use that data if you choose to, real time or at worst daily. Everybody develops hours budgets and knows how strictly they adhere to them. The time to figure that you're spending too many hours on a project and not knowing why is not next week or next month. It's this evening or tomorrow morning. That's a leading indicator to me. And because we're so
Yeah.
hours, we're so hours and labor focused. The lagging indicators back then is we'd review financials and how hours or materials affected them, fuel costs, things like that. And it can show us trends that we can now start to correct, but we're probably already 2 or 3 weeks late in real time of correcting them. So you're
Right.
sort of reading the news. It is lagging. It's not dead. It's not dead information, but it's certainly lagging by, a couple of weeks. And although it's important, and we build KPI dashboards to review that sort of information, the real leading indicators are today's news. And you, as a business owner, and with as well as you've embraced technology, I bet you glance, if not study, hours reports sometimes as often as daily, or your managers do.
Yeah. It's our best leading indicator because
Yeah.
we can tie when labor hours are over on a construction project. It seems to be that material costs are over on that construction project.
Yeah.
The longer a crew is on a project, the more money they tend to spend. They find a way. So if you can go from 20 days to 15 days to get a job done, that's 5 less days that you're deploying equipment, you're paying for the diesel, you're all the stuff that goes into the burden of delivering those services. And some of the cool things that we've set up with technology is, this is a funny story this morning. In our Disruptors peer group, Mark Praya of Peak Landscape was talking about throughput. And he was mentioning gross profit dollars per labor dollar spent. I'm like, man, that is a really cool ratio. I've thought about gross profit dollars per labor hour, but
Or
not
per
every
revenue
labor
stream,
hour.
or against revenue.
Or against revenue, exactly. That's something we measure, 40, 50, 60% gross margin. But labor dollar is great because my irrigation techs versus maybe a landscape pruning technician are going to be making different dollars and be charging the client different rates and different constructs. So I went into our AI operating system that our team has built, and I just simply asked it, hey, what's our gross profit dollars per labor dollar spent? And it was like over $3 in residential and maybe $1.70 in maintenance. So
Wow.
Almost double in residential, which was like, let's go sell more residential work. But it was, I'm just saying the technology is there. If you can come up with the right KPIs and you can build out the right technology, it's no longer a need of figuring out spreadsheets. It now becomes, how do you execute on this information? Which leads me to my next question for you, Tim, which is, okay, we've got the dashboard. It's telling us like the stoplight. We got green, we've got yellow, we've got red on it. What is the best way to take information from one of those meetings and then execute it and actually take action on it in the field, that day or the next morning? How have you found the communication cadence? And I'm struggling here a little bit maybe to ask this question, but simply, how do we execute on the KPIs that we know are red?
So I think it's different in construction and maintenance. In maintenance, all your account managers have different personalities, and your production managers, if you have that level between crew leader and account manager, a lot of companies do. They're pretty good at knowing their crews, and things you learn in leadership training is not only how to speak, but how to speak to specific people. Different people hear things in a different way. And so you have to know your audience. They may know it better than you and I.
Right.
They probably do. That's why we have them. They have to deliver those kinds of adjustments, those micro adjustments, in a real gentle, or they know their crews better than us, maybe in a firm way, maybe firmer than you and I would. It's really important to delegate that delivery in a micro environment. I think you're going to get it out to your field level workers differently, crew by crew. I don't think you can have a morning huddle with the entire company out in the parking lot and deliver the same message. I don't think it'll be heard the same by your entire workforce. I think it has to be delivered to each family. Each dad has to deliver it to their kids, or
Yeah.
you won't get much bang for your buck. In construction, it's a little different. It needs to be out there on the job site, and it's almost a point and shoot thing. Show me what you guys did to plant these last trees. Well, we went to the nursery where we stored the trees, and we brought them over here to the hole, and we set them down next to the hole. And then the one crew dug the hole and planted the tree. And then the other crew came back and fine graded. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Is there a chance that tomorrow you guys could just do nothing but dig holes? And then the next day, go get all the trees and plant them in pre-dug holes? Let's try that and see if that's more efficient than stopping and waiting for the guy to dig the hole. Where is your leak in the boat in production? And let's try a new system. Hey, and if I'm wrong, we'll go back to your way. Oh, that'll never work. Well, let's give it a try. It's my dime. So it's different in construction, I think, than maintenance is a little more routine, a little more mechanical. So
well, I really appreciate it and agree with both of those assessments, and I do see a lot of companies and owners wanting to control the narrative when it comes to executing on red KPIs. And so they want to round up their team and just tell everybody the same thing all at once. And I really like your advice of pushing that information to the production managers, let's say, and letting the production managers get with their 3 or 4 or 5 crew leaders and talk to them. And maybe one crew leader is doing great and the other isn't. And when you want to run I think people make this mistake too, is like, we want everyone to feel fair and the same. So we're going to tell everyone they need to improve, even though one crew leader is obviously not meeting the mark and the other is exceeding the mark. Those need to be 2 different conversations. And that's kind of what I'm picking up from what you're saying.
It is. And boy, that one crew that's already killing it, they're just fuming. They're building a resentment because you're telling them to go even faster. Oh. It's like, you don't talk to me, talk to that guy. See, he's going slower, So
let's talk about high-end residential construction, hardcore construction, the work you're doing today. A lot of people really idolize this stream of revenue. And I have a lot of people who come to us simply, I think, because we do this work, and they ask, how do I get into this line? So I want to ask, first off, what are some of the biggest challenges in high-end residential construction that people just don't see until they're in the thick of it? Let's start with that.
So if you're really new to it or inexperienced, and you first get an opportunity, which can often come through landscape architects. Quite often, landscape architects are the ones delegating to known performing contractors, and they quite often use the same ones over and over again because it makes them look good as the design team. Design build's a whole nother conversation. We'll stick with a design bid build for now. The other problem or the challenge that you're going to face if you're new to it is getting a stable of contractors. They're not using Belgard pavers. They're using imported Portugal limestone that's going to take 6 months to get here on a boat. And you better order some backstock in case you get it cut wrong. How much overage do I order? What are the cuts going to look like? Are they 30 by 32 or are they 30 and a half by 32 and a half? So I better get 32 by 34. Oh, well, that's a lot of waste. It's a lot of square footage over a 2,000 square foot pool patio. Yeah, but they're not going to wait 6 months if you ordered your materials short. So it's a new learning curve on really high-end materials and how to source them and to time them correctly. If it's a good architect, you're having these discussions before the house is maybe even erected. Maybe they have the team in place and you're doing deep drainage or deep irrigation and then leaving for a while. And during this time, you're not resting on your laurels, you're sourcing. And sourcing, if you've done a few high-end projects, can be a challenge if you're not used to dealing with those material vendors. You can't just pick up the phone book and, say, I need some limestone from North Africa. It takes a little bit of doing to find the stuff. So that's one thing. The other thing is plant material shopping. You have to use high-end vendors. Plant materials, not all alike. And some of the stuff, I won't mention them by name, but there's 2 pretty well-known tree large tree vendors. One of them is known for being quite expensive, and they're in the markets that you work in, and people turn their nose up at it quite often because of the cost. Well, that's probably where you need to be shopping, and you need to find the way to maybe the customer knows it's going to be expensive. They're in that market already. The architects probably warned them. You need to be finding the best materials available, and that's a paradigm shift for a lot of us. It was for me. I didn't realize that there was a whole nother level of material out there that I hadn't been exposed to previously. I wasn't aware. You don't know what you don't know, right?
Absolutely. And then what about working? I'm loving this because I'm going to send this to my team because it's the difference of a $200,000 install and a $2 million install is exactly what you're like. This is exactly what you're talking about. And when you get into that higher tier, let's talk about the general contractors that we're working with and we're working for and their expectations on quality workmanship and professionalism on the job site. What is, you mentioned some NDAs and some other things. I mean, what other challenges do you find in that residential bid build on the administrative side or the professionalism side?
So professionalism, a great example, depending on the type of properties you're working on now for maintenance, and where some of these people, some of your workforce has either come from or been used to, it's as simple as where you eating lunch and how are you comporting yourself during lunch. Are you stretched out on the lawn right by the front entry of a Class A office space building? Or are you in your truck? Or are you around the corner? Or are you in an area where no one would notice a labor force relaxing and having lunch in the shade? Man, that becomes really critical on high-end projects. You have to be very careful. Owners or representatives could show up at any time, and they're expecting practically butlers in tuxedos performing all the different scopes of all the different trades. And you have to aim as close to that as you realistically can, because that's kind of where expectations are, is butlers in tuxedos. And we all know that's not a reality, but that's what you're striving for. You really are representing a level of professionalism that people are willing to pay anything for. No questions asked. But if they don't get that, then they wonder, well, what am I paying for?
These are such great points you're making, because a lot of folks see the dollar signs and the unlimited money and the T&M or cost plus contract agreements and think, man, this is great. And then you point out the 6-month lead time for the custom stone. That immediately gives my hairs on the back of my neck standing up as a CEO, because it's like, oh gosh, don't mess that up. Don't mess that cut up. And if you do, sometimes it's not just a thing you could fix using money or resources. It's just, you just got to wait the time. And no one likes a house that's not getting the final occupancy permit because the landscaper forgot to order extra material.
Well, let's go to a higher level of business acumen for some of your listeners on what we just touched on long lead material and, a CEO, the hair on the back of their neck going up. Your A&R aging is going to look drastically different if you're fronting $500,000 worth of stone. So you have to know, before you even get into this world, how are you writing your contracts? How are you protecting yourself and staying within California labor contracting laws to get adequate deposits? Do your contracts read payment upon delivery on site? What are your limits on deposits? Is it paid when paid? Is the general contractor handing the cash flow? Or are you billing directly to a property management company or the owner in some cases? Rarely. Usually the owners are shrouded behind, operating companies within their own world. Even individual property owners at a certain level, they have property management companies just for themselves. And you better construct your contract and your scope and your payment schedules in a way where you're not going to be out $500,000 in cash flow and waiting on it for 120 days. or you won't be in that business very long.
That's a great point. A really good point, because if your suppliers have a certain, let's say they require 50% deposit when you place that material order, but your contract doesn't allow you to bill until you have that material on site, and it's a 4 to 6 month lead time, you're out that 50% unless, and
unless you have built it
it's
in
not fun.
that you
And then
it's not fun, and you won't sleep, for a month.
well, then people go, well, I got a line of credit, so I'm going to be okay. But your cost basis gets off, because if you're borrowing $500,000 for 6 months and you're on prime plus 1.5 or prime plus 2, you're looking at, I don't know, $6,000 or $7,000 a month of interest over, let's just say 6 months. You're $30,000-$40,000 of interest fees on your material that you marked up 10% or whatever. So there goes your markup, there goes your profit.
Yeah, I bet that wasn't in your G&A schedule to begin with. You don't figure on 6% interest.
Definitely not. I say that from experience. So
Yeah.
Tim, I want to kind of shift gears just a hair here. I want to ask you, so let's just talk to the 25-year-old landscaper who just started their business this year and is super excited because we are, I think, making landscaping cool again. What is your 1 or 2 pieces of advice from your years in the industry to a brand new owner just entering the space?
Add labor slowly. Well, first of all, back up. If it's maintenance, especially if it's commercial maintenance, even if you're small, start working on systems now. Some of them don't apply when you're a self-performing owner. And let's say you start with 2 foremen, 2 trucks, 2 trailers with equipment, and 2 gardeners on each crew. Maybe even smaller than that, maybe 1 and 1, everybody starts somewhere. Start thinking and asking questions about systems. What should I be looking at, and how should I be tracking it? What things can I put in place? A lot of our new people that start, and you've seen this in courses offered, it's starting to finally catch up. How often did this industry, CLCA is guilty of it too, and I've been a long proponent and a long time member. I was state president in 2017. We were a lagging indicator. We were training people how to change sprinkler heads when we should have been training business owners how to manage a P&L. We were late to that game. We're now focused on business training. We're still focused on water certification and water management, which in this state's critical. They don't give 2 shits about it in Northern Ohio, but here, it's still a big part of our business is water management. But to a young practitioner, he needs to gradually know how to operate a business. And how many people, us included, you and I, were well into their 30s, maybe later, that really didn't have that deep in your heart understanding of what we started the conversation with 45 minutes ago is you have $1 on the table in pennies. Where does each penny go? Which ones are consistent? Which ones are flexible? Young, new practitioners really need to get a grasp on that earlier than most of us did. It's a business.
That's such great advice.
Yeah, it is gardening. It is landscaping. We've got to know our craft. But it's a business.
Yeah, you can be the best artesian landscaper in the world, but if you're not turning a profit, you're going to, not in a bad way, but you're going to end up as an employee working for someone else sooner than later if you don't understand the fundamentals of business. I think that's great advice. And then on the people side, you kind of mentioned and started to say, don't add labor too quickly. What do you maybe elaborate on that for us?
We used to use a business model when Roger was more of a mom and pop in residential maintenance. We would stretch the existing crew as we slowly added new customers. We would stretch the existing crew to as much as 10 hours of overtime each a week. And when that got too painful to swallow, then it was time to hire another man, and everybody goes back to 32 or 40 hours a week until that crew got stretched to 50 hours a week. Don't hire the minute you land that next job. stretch a little first. And I know overtime's expensive, but onboarding someone and then not needing them in 3 months is pretty expensive too.
I completely agree. And yes, overtime is expensive on the payroll, but I think you have happier employees. Most, I think, of our team, they want to work a little bit of overtime, maybe, like you said, that 10 to 12 hours a week. And if you really break down the costs and you look at your entire P&L, overtime isn't that much more expensive because you've already recovered the depreciation of the vehicle. You've already recovered all of your rent and your fixed costs in your 40-hour work week if you're pricing your product correctly. So you actually, I would almost argue that your overtime is less expensive than your regular time if you're properly pricing your services. What's your thoughts on that?
So thank the person that taught you that, because that was an acquired skill. You didn't just pick that up accidentally. Somebody told you that you already have capacity because you've already covered known costs. It was figured when you figured your P&L and when you figured your overhead, you figured it at 40 hours. Well, build everything around 40 hours. So to add a little bit more, or to add another job to mowers that you already own or trailers that you already own, we have capacity to one more job on an account manager. You're not starting a new account manager at a new $80,000, $90,000 a year salary. He has capacity for one more job. We need to look at our businesses that way, that the stretch and those slight increases, it's not as bad as you think. Because like you said, we have a lot of that built in already to the machine. And it's the smart move rather than knee jerk and thinking, well, I'm growing, I got to hire. Well, slow down, take your time, to go slow.
I learned this from Jeffrey Slough, who taught me so much. He came on and I was able to hire him as our leader of maintenance. And it's an amazing place when you're 20. I was 29 years old. I was able to hire someone who was my mentor. And I think that's one of the most rewarding things as a business owner is when you can get to the point where you're hiring people who actually mentor you and teach you things. We as owners sometimes feel like we have to be the lion in the room that is the all-knowing king. And the truth is, when you can ask questions and you can be curious as the owner and CEO, you just empower your team to go out there and do their best work.
Exactly. And I think it's a great position to be in. The job I had at Pacific Landscape Management up in the Seattle area before I started, for my first year and a half working for Gibson on the Peninsula, I commuted weekly by air. I was still living in Seattle, and I flew down every week and lived in an extended stay in Mountain View. I flew back. I flew down Monday morning at 6 a.m. and flew back at 9 p.m. on Thursday night. And did that for, I guess, not quite 18 months, but a long time. And
that's a long time.
It was still exciting and rewarding. But the company I had left up there, who I thought I'd probably be with till in retirement before this opportunity came up, they hired me, and it was apparent in the interview that they were hiring me as a project manager. And up there, or at least with this company, their project managers are sort of quasi superintendents in construction. They had just moved their senior project manager superintendent into a general manager's position. And upon interviewing me, they politely, when they had me privately, said, "Are you going to be okay working with someone as your immediate supervisor that you clearly have more experience than?" I said, "Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity. I can help teach him and make him more successful, and he'll therefore appreciate me. He might get off my back a little." It's a win-win. There's no downside to letting your ego down and just doing what's needed of you. And hats off to the guy that was doing that for you.
Yeah, thank you. And that's, it's an incredible place to be. And I think that needs to be normalized more in today's workforce.
It does.
So Tim, I cannot believe it's an hour. Like we just hit an hour. This is, it felt like 10 minutes.
I can't either. We gotta meet for coffee or something.
Well, 100%. We're not too far away. I'm between planes right now. I just sold my plane, but when I get my next plane that hopefully will be in the next few weeks, I'll fly up and we'll have to grab lunch.
Airport right here,
I wanna
about a
see-
mile away from me in Cameron Park. I'm right near the Cameron Park Air Park, where
That's
you
a
can
great little
literally
spot.
taxi to your house.
That's where the stop signs were like, 2 feet high,
Yeah.
so the planes can roll over. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so cool.
Yep,
That's
it's
so
a great
cool.
airport. It's a great airport.
Oh, man,
All right,
that is
sir.
one of the yeah. Hey, I
appreciate the invitation.
and thank you for coming on, Tim. You've done so much for this industry through the CLCA, all your volunteer hours. You've been an inspiration to so many, and you've really, really helped us grow as a community and an industry, especially here on the West Coast and in California. We don't have enough leadership, and you've done a great job. And I've looked up to you for a number of years, and I can go back. Probably it's at least 20 years. There is a CLCA. I just need to tell you this story real quick. I'll let you go after this.
Okay.
There is a CLCA award banquet in Hawaii. It must have been around that 2007, 2008 mark. I want to say it was right before 2008. And, I'm like 16, 17, maybe a little bit older, but it was yourself, it was John Valet, and it was a few others that were kind of the as I looked at it, the big dogs of the industry. And I remember just kind of sitting there observing you all kind of talk about something. I was kind of within earshot, and I was just like, man, one day I want to run a big company like those guys. And so you've been someone I've looked up to for a long time. So I just want to say thanks for your leadership.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And good luck in everything you're doing, man. I'll continue to comment on some of your posts on LinkedIn, and we will get together in person, maybe before the year's out here.
Would love it. All right, Tim. Well, you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for tuning in to Trades Talk, where the next generation of disruptors comes to raise the bar. If you got value from today's episode, share it with someone in the trades who's ready to level up. For more tools, insights, and community, follow host Justin White and join the movement at jwhitegroup.com.